And what more can the British government do to try to help the people of Ukraine at this, their most desperate hour?
Well, it's just truly appalling, isn't it? The unfolding atrocities that we're seeing now every day are just so breaking, and things that we just never thought that we would see again in our lifetimes on our doorstep, and it's absolutely appalling. And you know, the international community, with Britain playing its leading role, we need to retain that unity of strength in our vow to bring those to justice for war crimes and for these atrocities. Unity in strength in terms of sanctions, which still could go further. We want the British government to close down many of the loopholes and some of the trusts and some of the other things that exist that mean that the sanctions aren't quite being as effective as they could here in the UK. And united in that strength in terms of providing and continue to provide military aid to the Ukrainian people and armies as well, which has actually been very effective to date, but could go further and could go faster.
Let me bring you back to domestic politics, if I may. Of course, we've been hearing overnight, sort of tea time yesterday, that the government is planning to sell Channel 4. I spoke to a previous Culture Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, and asked him whether he would have considered selling Channel 4 when he was in the hot seat. Let's listen to what he had to say, if you'll indulge us, and then I'd love to get your response to that. Here we go.
Look, I'm not against privatisation in other contexts, but what I'm in favour of is competition. And I think that we have a very high standard of broadcasting in this country because we have competition not just in the very popular soap operas and box sets and series that are going to be commercially very successful, but we also have competition in other areas like news and documentaries, which are not likely to be commercially viable. And that's, I think it's really important to maintain that competition. And I do think Channel 4 is part of that ecosystem.
He also told me, Ms. Powell, that he didn't even contemplate selling Channel 4 when he was Culture Secretary. Your thoughts on the suggestions from Nadine Dorries this morning that that's the way forward?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with Jeremy Hunt there. I just don't see what the case is for selling off Channel 4. I mean, notwithstanding that it's just not anybody's priority right now. There's plenty of other things that the government should be getting on with, like dealing with the cost of living crisis and so on. But Channel 4 is a non-for-profit, publicly owned broadcasting company whose remit is very specific and special and unique in the UK, in that it's there to support small independent production companies. It doesn't own the IP itself. It doesn't own those programmes itself. And so that nurtures and allows lots of small businesses to develop, particularly outside of London. And Channel 4 do a great deal in terms of investing in that levelling up agenda as well. So I just don't understand why they're doing it. Nobody's in favour of it. The industry is not in favour. Channel 4 itself isn't in favour. The public are quite happy with things as they are. So it really does feel like the wrong decision at the wrong time. And, you know, it feels like it is a cultural vandalism, a bit of a vendetta, if you like, against some of the news output that the government just doesn't like.
Talk to me about the cancer care report that we're going to be hearing more about today. The where you're speaking to us from this morning, the northwest, Liverpool particularly, has got the most challenges when it comes to cancer cases in the whole of England. It looks as though potentially we're moving backwards when it comes to treating cancer. What does Labour put that down to?
Well, look, I mean, we've historically have always had some of the worst cancer treatment rates. In recent times we've reversed that trend, and we've seen and treated people much more quickly. Obviously, the last Labour government brought in very fast targets for cancer treatment and diagnosis, which absolutely sped up the system and dealt some of those deep inequalities in terms of care that we had historically been seeing. There's no question that the pandemic and what we saw in terms of the NHS has put set that backwards, really. There's no question that people didn't go to hospital, perhaps didn't go to see their doctor in early stages when they had worries, they had concerns, and that's going to have a lag as well. And obviously the NHS is dealing with a huge backlog here, and it hasn't got the staff, it hasn't got the resources that it needs to really deal with those all-time high waiting lists that it's now got, and that's obviously going to have a dramatic effect on things like cancer care and other areas as well.
I don't know if you heard the Wales Secretary was on the programme yesterday saying the world's moved on, and as far as Partygate is concerned, the Prime Minister will be staying in post as he should. We clipped that up on Twitter. More than 500,000 people viewed that on my Twitter feed yesterday. As you can imagine, it was a myriad of different comments. What's your view?
Well, I mean, people won't forget Partygate that easily, I'm afraid. I mean, the government might want to brush it under the carpet, but it really matters. It really matters because of the sacrifices that everybody else made in not seeing their loved ones, in not attending funerals, in not seeing people who were dying in hospital, or being able to see grandchildren born that they hadn't even met for the first year of their lives. Those sacrifices are absolutely enormous that people took. And what we've seen unfolding is that the very people who made those rules and who told us to behave in that way weren't following the same rules. The senior civil servants in Downing Street, the politicians in Downing Street, others in Downing Street who were engaging in serial social gatherings and activities, otherwise known as parties, at a time when we were all making those sacrifices. So I think, the government ministers can I'm sure, continue to come on your programme and try and brush that under the carpet, but the public just won't forgive that. And the public wants to see some accountability for that, and not just pretending that it's not existing and saying, well, sorry, there's more important issues for us to be thinking about.
It's 2 years yesterday since Keir Starmer became the Labour leader. Since then, we've had Partygate. We've had 166,000 deaths directly accountable to COVID, we're told, and the government are doing U-turn after U-turn after U-turn. But Labour is still only a few points ahead in the opinion polls. Why is that?
Well, I think when Keir became leader 2 years ago, we were something like 15 points behind in the opinion polls, or some very large double-digit figure. So I think by any sort of suggestion, Keir has done a really amazing job in turning that around, in getting the Labour Party back into a position where we are taken seriously again, and people are listening to us again, and we're listening to the public again as well. So, we don't take anything for granted. We know it's a very, very, very tough path to power for Labour at the next election. And given that, as you say, there have been these huge big times of crisis where people expect politicians to sort of lay down arms, if you like, and work together, which is what Keir tried to do through most of COVID. It's what we're trying to do in terms of the Ukraine situation and so on. I think to have seen such a remarkable turnaround in our fortunes in such a small space of time, I think is to Keir's great credit.
Good to talk to you, as always. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.